My son, Aaron, had one last wish for his birthday to go to Disneyland with his dad and me. But Chris, my husband, never really liked me or Aaron. I begged him to go, and finally, he agreed. The night before we were supposed to leave, Chris vanished. Aaron died before we could go. His wish was never fulfilled. After taking care of the funeral all by myself, I saw a picture of Chris on my sister Sharon's Instagram. The caption said, "I wanted to see snow, and you took me thousands of miles to find it." I kept my cool, packed my things, and didn't cry or make a scene. Then Chris showed up, begging me not to leave. It wasn't surprising that Chris would drop everything for Sharon. He always put her first. He used to call me a social climber like I was trying to use him to get ahead. How could I ever compare to his eternal beloved? I went back to our house, the place we were supposed to be a family. But Chris rarely came here. It was more like a place for Aaron and me. Aaron's things were everywhere. I cried as I started to get rid of everything that reminded me of him and our life together. As I was dragging my suitcase downstairs, I ran into Chris. He was carrying Sharon into the house. He looked worried. He brushed past me, treating me like a stranger. He didn't even look at me. This was normal. When Sharon was around, I was invisible to him. Chris stopped when he saw my suitcase. "Amber, another one of your dramatic stunts," he said, his voice flat. Sharon, clinging to Chris' neck, looked up at me. "Amber," I twisted my ankle. "Since Chris said it's close by, he brought me here to take care of it. You don't mind, do you?" It was just a twisted ankle. I watched as Chris gently put her on the couch and got an ice pack for her foot. He treated her like she was made of glass. Once, when I got in a car accident and broke my leg, I needed a family member to sign some papers for my surgery. I reached out to Chris. He said, "A broken leg isn't life or death. Why bother me?" He was the only family I had left. He refused to sign the papers, so I had to ask a friend to help me. Love and its absence were always so clear. Finally, I said, "Chris, we're done. We're broken up." I almost said divorced, but we never even got a marriage license. It was just a quick ceremony. Chris thought I was jealous of Sharon. He didn't even look up. "What now? Are you changing your tactics? You think you can't threaten me with your son, so now you're using yourself." A year ago, Aaron was diagnosed with brain cancer. He got tons of notices about critical illnesses. He desperately wanted to see Chris, but Chris never visited him. Chris thought I was using Aaron to get sympathy and manipulate him. After 10 years together, that's how little he thought of me. I wiped away my tears. "Think what you want. I'm leaving." I started to leave with my luggage. Sharon interrupted. "Chris, I heard you were going to take Aaron to Disneyland. You didn't cancel that for the mountain trip with me, did you?" Amber is upset. Chris said soothingly, "Don't worry, there are priorities. We can go to Disneyland anytime, but once the snow melts, we won't be able to see it like this." I scoffed. Ignoring them, I dragged my suitcase out. Chris seemed to realize something was wrong. He rushed over and grabbed my hand. "It's the middle of the night, and you insist on." He saw my swollen eyes and stopped. "Is missing a trip to Disneyland really worth crying over like this?" My eyes must have been red and puffy. I saw a hint of pity in his eyes. "Let me clear my schedule next month, and I'll take Aaron then, okay?" Next month? What next month did Aaron have? If he cared about our son, he wouldn't say such a stupid thing. I pulled my hand away. "No need." Chris stared at his empty hand, stunned. He never expected the woman who used to cling to him would now avoid him like the plague. He tried to catch up, but Sharon grabbed his arm. "Chris, it's all my fault. Even though I knew Aaron was faking his illness, I shouldn't have competed with a child for your attention. Now Amber is angry at me. Faking his illness?" My mind went blank. When I came back to reality, I had already slapped Sharon.
Chris's face, initially tinged with guilt, shifted instantly, positioning Sharon protectively behind him. He eyed me warily. "Amber, what are you doing? She is your sister." I glared at Sharon. "You'd better watch your mouth." Sharon, looking hurt, pleaded, "Chris, don't let me come between you two. If my sister won't admit that Aaron is faking his illness, I'll just drop it." My brow furrowed as I turned to Chris. "You think Aaron is faking it too?" He remained silent. Looking around, Aaron was nowhere to be seen. With a calm tone, Chris asked, "Where did you whisk him off to again?" He clearly didn't believe me. If only he would come home, he'd see the table covered in medications and medical records. Yet, he never returned. I remember when Aaron knew he didn't have much time left. He wanted one last family trip to Disneyland. I had begged Chris, even going so far as to kneel before him. In the end, I clung to his pants, promising that this would be the last time I would ever bother him. I was willing to set him free. At that moment, he looked down at me, slightly stunned, his eyes filled with both joy and complexity. "You mean that?" "Yes," I murmured, closing my eyes as tears streamed down. Chris was the child I found by the riverbank when we were little. I pleaded with my parents to adopt him. He became my brother. When I was in junior high school, my parents divorced, and Sharon was awarded custody of my father. Since I had always followed Chris around, I clung to his sleeve and begged begged him to come with me and my mother. This one act of mine earned me Chris's resentment for many years. He had wanted to go with Sharon. Because of me, he could only watch as Sharon went abroad. Later, my mother entrusted me to Chris, saying that only by handing me over to him could she rest in peace. Chris was forced to have a makeshift wedding with me. There were no relatives, no friends, no marriage certificate. He said that this was all I deserved. On her deathbed, my mother even asked us when we would get our marriage certificate. Chris evaded the question. Once out of the hospital room, he lost all his patience. Wasn't it enough that your mother threatened me into marrying you? Now you want to make it official. I was about to defend myself.